hopefully he's had a lovely Christmas as well, and he'll be back working for SecondsOut next year, this year too. I'm still getting used to the fact that we've actually turned over to 2024 now. But we're going to be talking a little bit about the end of 2023 because we didn't have a show last week. I think it was Christmas Day or something, someone said. But we need to reflect on the Day of Reckoning because we haven't spoken on air about that since. And also look ahead to 2024 and try and predict the future, which is a bit of a mug's game, but, you know, who better than these two? But yeah, get us your comments and questions in. We'll read out as many as we can. Please give us a thumbs up and a subscribe if you haven't already. But yeah, as Ayman said, we'll be here every Monday, hopefully in 2024. The caveat being, you know, emergencies, anything crazy happens, maybe we'll have to change dates or times. But fingers crossed, we'll be with you throughout the year. And Ayman, Day of Reckoning, huge show. I was a bit negative about it on social media just after it happened, in that despite there being upsets on the card, there were very few competitive fights. Even the upsets turned out to be quite one-sided. It seems a bit churlish to complain given the amount of talent on one show. What did you make of it?
No, I did get the perspective coming through about the card, and there was some feeling from a lot of people, more so some of the hardened boxing fans or hardened people that have been here in the industry for many a year, saying there weren't many fights really there of consequence. And I disagreed with that going into that pay-per-view, with the feeling that if Joshua lost, then where did he stand? If Wilder didn't win, as he didn't do, where did he stand? The likes of Caballel, who'd been floating around for years at a certain level and not looked to pursue further shots higher up the chain, would he be dispatched of? Would Makhmudov really announce himself? Well, we saw what happened there. So, I mean, I kind of was, when it came to it, and I was covering the launch press conference in London, that really kind of got me pumped with the whole machinations of Wilder's in the room and AJ's in the room and Jarrell's now back and he's added into the mix. And where's Daniel Dubois stand going forward with the doubts heading to him? It got me pumped for it, and even more so when the event came. So I thought, for an event, for a card as a whole, for me, it delivered.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see talented fighters, you know. I mean, when I was in Abu Dhabi for Bivol against, God, who did Bivol fight in Abu Dhabi? Gilberto Ramirez Zurdo. And he performed really well, and it wasn't really a competitive fight after about the fourth round. And just being able to witness that level of talent up close. Actually, Mayweather against Juan Manuel Marquez back in 2008 is a much older, but probably a more apt example of that. I think sometimes it is great just to see that level of ability up close. But the flip side of that is you want to see him in competitive fights. It kind of whets the appetite as much as anything. And no disrespect to the likes of Lyndon Arthur and Ellis Zorro. And I know Lyndon Arthur took a hell of a lot of stick, particularly from the other side of the Atlantic, for his performance against Dimitri Bivol. And no disrespect to either of those guys, both great guys, both accomplished at their own level. But the fact that we've now seen Jai Opetaia fight two domestic level British fighters in a row, and I think I said on one of the social media channels that a good fight may have been Jordan Thompson against Ellis Zorro, rather than both challenging Opetaia in quick succession and getting, you know, wiped out in quick succession also. We now want to see Opetaia tested, just like we want to see Bivol fight Beterbiev. On the heavyweight side, it was good to see some upsets. Was delighted for Joseph Parker, who's a really, really nice guy. And you know, Deontay Wilder seemed to take the defeat in good spirits and is talking about his future. We expect him to return, although that seems to change on an almost daily basis. Obviously taken a leaf out of his old rival Tyson Fury's book there. I think the majority of attention, as it was in the build-up, has gone to Anthony Joshua, who put in a destructive, dominant performance to stop Otto Wallin. Hurt his nose very early on, Wallin's nose very early on in the fight, and just was always first to the punch in the exchanges. Didn't seem to have any respect for Otto Wallin's power. And and yeah, just really seek and destroy a mission and got it done with Ben Davison in the corner for the first time as well. So very impressive. And we're putting out a poll basically saying, do you consider AJ to be back to his best? Simple binary choice, yes or no. Because it seems to have very much divided opinion. We've had a lot of people saying, well, this is the AJ we wanted. This is the aggressive AJ we've been looking for some time. And then we saw another school of thought embodied by Ayman's interview with Thomas Hauser a couple of days ago, wherein Hauser said he doesn't think AJ proved a great deal because of the, lack of strong opposition against him. And again, that's no disrespect to Otto Wallin, but he didn't show much on the day of reckoning, at the day of reckoning. So, is AJ truly back to his best, or is the jury still out? Ayman, watching it, and reflecting on it since, what's your view on that?
Yeah, look, right now the perspective is sort of shifting on Joshua, isn't it? From the doubts that were thrown at his feet throughout fight week and previous because of the defeats, because of the way he handled the second defeat to Oleksandr Usyk in Jeddah. Everyone's always questioned his mentality, which I find somewhat unfair, with him being largely under the microscope for any minutiae in terms of whatever action he takes. So those were there for Joshua, and those are what people were looking at. And that dominant performance over Otto Wallin, deemed as a stiff opponent, well, he took stiff shots all night from Joshua. But the thing and feeling for me is, and speaking to Hauser sort of helped me kind of paint a full picture and draw a conclusion from it. It was like, where truly does Wallin rank in amongst that heavyweight pack? Because he's not a front runner. My take on that is, he beat Gassiev, but what's Gassiev accomplished at heavyweight? A cruiserweight fighter, very good cruiserweight fighter, but at heavyweight, where does he fall in the ranks to? His best and his biggest claim so far is the performance against Tyson Fury, which was, and should be stated, that on another night he might have got the victory and been the one to defeat Tyson Fury, but on the night he didn't, and he's stuttered outside of that. The Kamil Sokolowski fight was a real odd performance, and that's a gatekeeper fight for prospects coming up. It was a real strange one for Otto. So a real kind of don't really know where to place Otto, and therefore don't really know where to place Joshua's win over him, especially when you consider as well, coming into it, the types of fighters that Eddie was looking to place Joshua in against were the likes of Kaunaki, essentially people who are looking to beat, looking to get the victory, were looking to give him that confidence boost and win. And I think that's what's happened here. AJ's got the confidence boosting win. And I feel that with a bit more time, we might see more of a fluid version of the Ben Davison version of Joshua. But this was a very good start and a very good turning the corner on that perspective of Joshua. But I'm not fully behind it just yet.
Well, we'll just go to the chat for the first time tonight. Please keep them coming, guys. Questions, comments, likes as well, because we only seem to have 2 at the moment. I blame Thunder Road because he's not here to remind people to like the video. Your Discover Relax channel says Joshua versus Caballero would be a good fight. The winner should fight against the winner between Usyk and Fury. There's no chance Joshua's going to take that fight. I agree it'd be a really good fight, and the winner of that would deserve a title shot. But, it's the epitome of maximum risk, minimum reward, unfortunately. Just C. Dot says, I don't think AJ is quite back to his old self. However, he certainly seems to be the closest to it than he's been for some time. Errol HL says, Joshua never really did anything to suggest he ever declined as a fighter. He only looked worse in Usyk fights because it's Usyk. And even in those fights, he was boxing well. I vehemently disagree with that, Errol. I'm sorry to say. I think there was clear signs of, maybe not decline, but certainly a lack of form against Jermaine Franklin and against Robert Helenius. Now, there's reasons for that. The style of Franklin, the fact that Helenius came in on short notice after the Dillian White issue. But there were signs that AJ wasn't as confident as he used to be, was hesitant, was apprehensive, was not putting his shots together as well as he had in the past, and didn't have that fluidity that seemed to come naturally in years past in some of his better performances. So I don't think it's just the case of Usyk was so good he made AJ look bad. I actually think AJ's performance in the second Usyk fight was much better than his performances against Franklin and Helenius. But obviously he won those and lost that because Usyk is such a good fighter. But I think there were signs that AJ wasn't the fighter of old in those couple of performances I've mentioned. Jake DeVille says Joshua had to become a more careful fighter versus Ruiz and Usyk. That said, he does appear to come back out of his shell, and with a new trainer, he might actually become the dominant champ. Who else? Just C. Dot says could have got Wallin out of there sooner. Perhaps, yeah. I mean, there's going to be a bit of caution still, isn't there? You know, when he was attacking against Usyk, he got hurt in the first fight towards the end. When he went for the kill against Andy Ruiz, he obviously precipitated his own downfall. So there are reasons, good reasons, sensible reasons why. Ryan Mann asked if I'm still trying to get off with Sonny Edwards' sister. No, I gave up on that around when he exposed me on social media. But good wishes to Sonny Edwards and the whole Edwards family over this festive season. I'm sure he's ready to get back in after that amazing fight with Bam Rodriguez. Sahid Olabanji says, everyone just like to talk about AJ, but don't want to give him credit for bringing the heavyweight division back to light. I'm not sure that's true. I think AJ's been given a hell of a lot of credit for bringing the sport back to prominence, particularly in the UK and particularly from Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. I don't think you can underrate what he did both in the Olympics in bringing the sport back to prominence and as a professional. But that doesn't mean he's immune or beyond criticism. You know, you've got to be fair. And if you feel that AJ's not the fighter he once was, and there were certain clues in recent performances that suggest that, then you have to say it. But it is heartening to see him in, you know, rare form against Otto Wallin, and we hope that continues depending on what he does next. What do we think is next now for Anthony Joshua, Ayman? What do you think? You know, because obviously Fury and Usyk go into battle February the 17th. So he's got to wait if he wants the winner of that. Presumably he'll keep busy in the meantime. Who do you think is a likely opponent for AJ next?
There was that sort of that like clarity, then lack of clarity when Raheem was asking AJ in his interview, and he was like, "What do you want? Do you want Wilder or do you want the belts?" And AJ was like, "Well, I want Wilder, but if the belts are there, then I want the belts. And Wilder, I don't want Wilder, but I want the belts, and I want Wilder if he's got the belt." And there was all that going on in the fight week, and then he had to then clarify it in the post-fight interview when he was asked, and he said, "Look, I'll fight Wilder, but if Wilder doesn't have a belt, I don't want him." And that's kind of been his motivation ever since he lost the belt to reclaim a belt. AJ doesn't really want to get these rivalries that boxing fans have picked off as ones that they want to see on their calendars, mark those on the calendars for this year to come. He'd rather chase whoever's holding the belt. So therefore, we know what the picture is then for AJ. The picture is clearly Fury versus Usyk. Then the IBF is going to fragment off of that. It's the IBF, isn't it? And then they'll rematch again for the unified, and then it'll be Joshua and it'll be Hrgovic for the IBF title. That's plainly and clearly for me the direction for Anthony Joshua there. Unless for some reason the winner, the rematch doesn't happen in the undisputed fight, and then the winner of the undisputed decides to defend against Hrgovic, and Anthony Joshua has to wait his turn. But for me, it looks like the picture's pretty clear. It's Hrgovic, or there was the feeling that potentially, and it's turned around a little bit because it was said that he wouldn't take this fight in the lead up to it. But now, I believe it was on IFL, Eddie Hearns mentioned it, and Hauser also said in my interview with him that he'd mentioned it too. And I thought it was a very interesting mention. And Ngannou would be a potential opponent. Now, that's a very that's a very wild direction to go from stating specifically that, look, I don't really want Ngannou, and now I do want Ngannou. What's the reason behind that if that does materialize? But that's also there in the offing too, considering what he did against Tyson Fury, considering what it would bring in terms of eyes, considering what AJ would feel he could do to Ngannou, and leaving Hrgovic for an extra fight there, then going into undisputed. Title fight.
Yeah. And we talked there about the undisputed fight taking place on February 17th in Riyadh, the ongoing, never-ending, apparently, Riyadh season. Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk. I think I read either today or yesterday that Usyk's now flown out to Riyadh. Fury's now flown out to Riyadh to conclude his preparations or continue, I guess, because there's still, 6 weeks to go. The recent performance from Fury against Francis Ngannou, and the comments and criticisms of the training team and the training camp from Big John Fury on our channel. It's nice to reference our channel with some of these interviews. It seems we are working, guys, so you know. It seems to be giving Usyk, in the minds of a lot of people, because I've been looking on social media as well, more of a chance. People seem to now feel, not that Usyk's the favourite necessarily, but it seems to be evening up a bit compared to when the fight was first announced. Before, like when it was announced it had been signed, so before the Ngannou fight, not everyone, but most people seem to be picking Fury on points. That seems to be a consensus pick, you know, a bigger version of Usyk, and more awkward, switch hitting, tall, heavy Fury would be too big and too strong and just too difficult puzzle for even Usyk to solve. And that seems to be changing very much now that Fury's kind of laid an egg, if you like, against Francis Ngannou. What do you make of that, Ayman? And also, because I don't think we've discussed this, because we had Steve Wellings on, who did a fine job, of course, over the last couple of weeks. But of John Fury's comments, you know, is it all a smokescreen? Is he trying to lull Usyk into a false sense of security, or is he genuinely unhappy with Tyson's situation?
Steve Wellings, who's that? Never heard of him. Never heard of that guy. Also, by the way, we're talking about credit. Let's get this out of the way as well too. Let's get a resolution from everyone in the industry. Credit where you get your sources from. Too many people saying, I heard this in an interview. I heard that in an interview. What interview? It's hearsay. Say where you saw it. Come on, guys. Help each other out. But yes, so going on to Tyson Fury and his chances against Oleksandr Usyk. Look, I'll be plain and clear with this. And as I have been, I've always tended to flip-flop with my choices as to who I feel wins that fight between the two, because of what the skills are that they bring to the ring, because of the physicality that Fury brings to the ring, because of the level of skill and IQ that Usyk brings to the ring. Right now, I stand on Usyk. I stood on Usyk before the Ngannou fight. I'll stay there for now, but I'll be honest with you, I'm likely to flip-flop again until that fight happens. So bear with me on that one. But I imagine there are a lot of people in the 100 and something in the chat right now who aren't giving their opinions on Fury Usyk. So let me know in the comments as well too what your picks are for Fury versus Usyk. But look, yeah, Usyk for me stands as my pick right now. But John Fury's comments, for anyone who's looking to back the Brit, for anyone who's been following the Fury journey for many, many years, like yourself, Danny, followed Fury from the start, been carted by him in the back of the car and on the traveller parks and such. Hearing his father say, and I know that his father said a lot throughout his career, and sometimes you have to take a pinch of salt, and the Furies are savvy in that sense, because they know that when it comes to an interview, you want a headline, they want to give you a headline. Let's get the headline in. You got the headline in about the Fury camp being a circus, but is there merit to it? I don't feel that John Fury doesn't have legitimate concerns about the camp going into an undisputed fight. I think his concerns are reasonable without knowing the concerns, because of the height of the stake involved, because it's undisputed. I think John might find himself on the periphery of the undisputed because of the occasion, and what John's side of the bargaining is when he comes into an event like this might detract away from the focus there by it being a deliberate consequence or not. But that's part of the Fury package. That's part of the John Fury package. And if he feels that he's out of the picture, then he might feel that he doesn't have a real hold on it and doesn't have a real understanding of what the preparations are going into. I like to have the faith that Fury, that being Tyson, does have his camp in check and is preparing fully for a Usyk fight. I can't fully feel that Tyson won't be taking this camp seriously. So I would without really knowing the details there, I'll be backing that Tyson does have his ducks in a row heading into the Usyk fight.
I appreciate the acknowledgement. I am kind of Paul Heyman to Tyson Fury's Brock Lesnar. A few chats here. MC Boswell says AJ should do a third fight with Ruiz before we see him fight Usyk again or Fury, as they're 1-1. And let's see indeed if he is the old AJ. Smoking Joe says if Joshua performs similarly against Hrgovic, there is a very strong claim that he's back to his best. And he also says what refereeing we will get what referee we get will make a big difference to the Fury Usyk outcome. Will they allow holding and low blows? Yeah, maybe we'll have a special guest referee of like Frank Warren jump in there or someone else. Samuel WL says, who do you guys think will win Fury versus Usyk? And do you guys think we'll get an AJ versus Usyk 3? Okay, well, I might as well jump off on that as I was going to go into Fury Usyk anyway. I still think Fury beats Usyk for all the same reasons I did before. I think he clearly underestimated Ngannou. I don't think, he put as much in necessarily to training camp as he should have. I think he probably thought it'd be more of a walk in the park instead of a walk through a minefield, as it turned out to be. And I think, if anything, this increases his chances of beating Usyk because it will serve as a wake-up call that he's not unbeatable, that his legacy is at stake, and that it's incredibly important he leaves no stone unturned when preparing for someone who is used to winning on away turf, who's won world titles at different weights, which Fury can't claim, who is a natural southpaw, which again Fury can't claim, and who's found a way to beat every man that's put in front of him so far, and for the most part, pretty dominantly as well. I think there's every chance this becomes the hardest fight of Fury's career, but I still think that Fury, when it comes to the crunch, is too big, too awkward, too strong. I think the point that Smoke and Joe made about the referee is well made. Because I think, if Fury is allowed to get away with a lot of things we've seen him do in other fights, these are things that there's no real way to prepare for. Usyk can go in against big, strong guys in sparring and encourage them to claim him and to wrestle him around. But it's not the same as doing it under the lights and the big occasion and just getting to grips with it. No one's going to be quite as tall and long as Fury with the same amount of talent and ability that he has. And the style that he can use, that kind of leaning on and bullying around and that kind of thing, he's owned that over many years. So anyone you bring into the training camp's not going to be able to replicate him entirely anyway. And I just think, I'm not saying he's going to make it an incredibly dirty fight or be a spoiler, but I do fancy him to come through. I think he'll do enough work when he needs to and negate Usyk when he needs to come out with the victory, probably on points or maybe wearing him down for a late stoppage. So I don't think we'll see Usyk AJ 3 because I think without Usyk having all the belts, there's not really a reason for it. There's not really a strong driver because AJ was clearly beaten in the first two fights. I think we're much more likely to see AJ against Fury, which is a huge, huge fight worldwide, but particularly in Britain. I hope it happens in the UK. I'd be very disappointed if it ended up in the Middle East, although I'd completely understand the reasoning behind it. But yeah, I mean, that's a fight that people in Britain have wanted to see for a long, long time. If it's a resurgent AJ with the IBF belt against Fury, who's come off 2 Usyk victories and has 3 of the 4 major titles, so it's the third undisputed fight. The second, because an Usyk rematch wouldn't be for all 4 belts. So the second undisputed fight, but this one, the first between 2 Brits in the 4-belt era, 2 of the biggest stars in world boxing as well. I mean, what more could you want? I was just seeing if there's more in the chat. I think that's it at the moment. As Ayman mentioned, we have got over 100 in the chat at the moment. Thank you all for watching. But if you could all, or at least some of you, hit the thumbs up as well, because that's still on 2. Maybe it's delayed for me, but I reckon probably not. So yeah, if Thunder Road was here, he would be absolutely fuming with you. So if you can do that for me, I'd really appreciate it. Ayman, what's your prediction for Fury Usyk? I've stuck my head above the parapet, although people won't be surprised that I've picked Fury. But what do you think?
Man. So yeah, right now I'd probably be picking Usyk on points. Yeah, I think Usyk. It's really impressive how Usyk has still been able to maintain his high movement and the level in which he strikes his opponent. I don't really consider him much of I don't consider him like a high volume fighter, but just in the form of his accuracy and in the form of the way he's able to set his punches up, still at this level, still at this age. I really find that impressive, and those are something I'm looking at where Tyson has had the accusations of decline in some form, not in the form of ability, as John Fury clarified, but in the form of maybe some of his attributes, maybe some of his camp or preparations. Surely that's in consequence of other things being in decline. But when those performances coming into fights such as this have been up and down, Usyk have stayed constant. And when it comes to Usyk, we're really kind of nitpicking at little things, like with Inoue the other day when he fought against Tapales. A couple of people on social media that I saw were really kind of looking to highlight the big shots that Tapales landed on Inoue and say, look, there's a big open gap for a fighter to exploit. Well, shock horror, boxer gets hit and boxers get hit clean, whoever you are. Usyk has been able to, Usyk was able to kind of, cut those moments down. And the real debate was about the low blow, which again, for a lot of people, the feeling was that's a clutch of straws. So I look at the form book right there going in, and the form currently stands heavily in the favor of Oleksandr Usyk, and that's why he's my pick at this moment.
At this moment. All right, well, we're just going to go to the chat before we move on to another topic, but Anson de Silva says, will Conor Benn be cleared in 2024? Taking a very long time now. Now, whether Conor Benn is cleared or not cleared is kind of a subject of pointed debate. But what I would say is that if you mean when is he going to be allowed to box under British Boxing Board of Control jurisdiction, easy for me to say, I would imagine it won't be until the latter end of 2024, if at all. And as if he even wants to. They've already said they won't consider his license application at the moment while the appeal that they and UCAD have made to the independent panel is ongoing. So we wait for the result of that. Whichever way that comes out, it could come out with him getting a ban from UCAD, in which case, and the independent panel upholding that ban. And if it does, then we probably won't see him in a Board of Control fight in 2024. And that may have repercussions for him fighting in other places as well. If, however, the independent panel rejects the appeal and goes ahead with their original decision, then he would presumably apply for a Board of Control license once again. And it'd be very difficult if that panel rejects their appeal for the board to then refuse that license application. And I'm sure for long-term financial prosperity, Matchroom, Conor Benn and the people around him would like him to fight in the UK. And he will feel that he should because he believes very much in his innocence and that he deserves to fight back here in the UK. But that's a long way of saying, I don't know, I suppose. But yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be anytime soon. Alan says, all the talk is how Ngannou exposed Fury, but at the same time, Dubois recently and Del Boy have exposed Usyk. He doesn't like being hit to the body. I don't know if anyone likes being hit anywhere, especially to the body, but I'm not sure they exposed him necessarily. I think the Del Boy fight, there was an element of Usyk not being entirely prepared for the inspired version of Chisora we got on that night, similar to Fury against Ngannou in some ways. Dubois, yeah, maybe. We can debate for ages whether it was a low blow or not. But the ultimate thing is Usyk did come back. He played by the rules that were laid down on the night, and he got the job done. And if anyone kind of cracked in the end, one way or the other, it was Dubois rather than Usyk. So, as much as you could say he was exposed, I think he proved something as well in that fight. But we shall see. Silent Milo says, of course, thanks to Eddie Hearn, we'll never get the best of Wilder and the best of Fury versus AJ. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I blame Eddie Hearn for it. But yeah, I mean, the best of Fury, is that still there? I'm not sure. Even John Fury says he's got a few years left in him, but I'm not sure he thinks he's the 100% Tyson Fury we saw beat Klitschko and Wilder in the first two fights, certainly. But we shall see. Too Blessed says, big up Danny Flexen every time. When's next? Same. I'm not sure what that bit means, but thanks for the big up, especially as it's all in block caps. Appreciate that. Samuel WL says, that's a very interesting take, brother. So would you say Fury takes it? Would you guys say it's only Fury's size that will make him win this fight? No, I think Fury's also very talented. He's got great ability. He can adapt. But it's more the fact that you put all that together with his size advantages. I think that makes it difficult. If Fury was, 6'1" and 220 pounds, and he was going up ability versus ability against Usyk, then it'd be a different story. But it's not, is it? A heavyweight division doesn't have a weight limit, so that's the way it works. Smoking Joe, hopefully we don't get Tony Weeks as referee after the number of low blows he allowed Ward to pull on Kovalev. That's quite not exactly a topical reference there, Smoking Joe, but I'll take your point. Oh, Too Blessed clarifies and says, when's the next Sam Jones interview? I don't know. They're like buses, aren't they? There hasn't been one for a while, so I'm sure there'll be a few at once very soon. It tends to be either when I'm struggling for someone to say something controversial or I can't say it myself, so I have to get Sam to almost say it for me, or when Sam wants to push the agenda, usually of Jack Catterall in recent times, but of one of his fighters, and those kind of two things come together as a perfect storm and we make magic. Anderson De Silva, Usyk will outthink and outsmart Fury, quite possibly. But I think they've both got really good teams around them as well. So it's not just about the fighters themselves in terms of strategy. Smoking Joe says, Inoue clear fighter of the year in my book. We're going to be talking about that kind of stuff in a minute. MC Boswell, I see Fury versus Usyk ending up similar to the Cunningham fight. What, so Fury's going to hit him with an illegal forearm and then dispatch him? Is that what you're saying? Just kidding, although I'm not. Samuel WL says, I find it interesting you're still picking Fury after the day of reckoning of Fury's performance against Ngannou. Can you explain what makes you pick a guy that had a hard fight against Valin? Well, I've already kind of explained why, and also styles make fights. I think Valin, similar to Ngannou, I think he wasn't expected to give Fury that tough of a challenge, and once he was in there and he found it difficult, it's like kind of walking through quicksand, isn't it? You know, you're struggling, and Fury had to then kind of get his bearings and readjust and everything else, whereas he had a bit more time to do that against Valin. Plus, he had that horrendous cut to deal with at the same time. Gorgaruga said, Dubois wasn't given 5 minutes to recover from a knockdown like Usyk was. That is true, but was it a knockdown? You know, we can go back and forth, but Usyk was responding to the amount of time he was given. If the referee had said, no, it's a legitimate knockdown and started counting, we don't know what would have happened. No one knows for sure. Anderson Silva, has Kid Galahad retired? Never seen him since his last defeat. Not as far as I'm aware, but we would probably need to check that. Sahid Olabanji, Usyk will beat Fury because he is just that good. Perhaps you're right. I mean, he is just that good, but whether he's good enough to beat Fury if Fury's on form, not so sure. But yes, now we move on, not just to fighter of the year, as someone alluded to there, but to the pound for pound ranks, because this kind of debate has sprung up once again in recent times after another great win for Naoya Inoue, the monster, beating Marlon Tapales to become undisputed at a second weight class, having already done it at bantamweight. He's now the undisputed super bantamweight champion of the world. So he's done it in 2 weight classes. Terence Crawford, of course, has done the same. Did it at super lightweight, is now has done it at welterweight as well after that great victory over Errol Spence. I know Crawford said on social media he thinks he should be fighter of the year because even though he's only fought once, the quality and importance of that victory outranks those of other fighters, multiple wins in the same time period. So, Ayman, I guess it's a double question in that who should be fighter of the year and who should be pound for pound number one and why?
So pound for pound and all that sort of things aren't really my bag. I leave that to everyone else. But I'll play ball for this. Pound for pound number one, I think, holds as probably Terence Crawford. And for me, look, your fighter of the year as well. It is a toss up between Terence Crawford and Naoya Inoue. But what really kind of seals the deal in favor of one of the fighters is. And I remember thinking back to the fight specifically, and in that fight with Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, billed as 2 elite level fighters, the way that Terence Crawford was able to dispatch of Errol Spence with what seemed like ease really kind of made me look at boxing as like, maybe we see elite level as the top, but Terence Crawford really ascending above that level as a fighter. I don't know what you call that. I don't know what you'd label that as. Maybe we can label it here. So the people in the comments can label that level here. But he was head and shoulders above another fighter classed at that level, which was a real eye-opener for me. And I'm not diminishing Inoue's record at all. He's fought some very, very good fighters, but I don't see that kind of level of fighter that he's in against, probably Donaire being the best of the competition that he's fought, and that being quite recently. So Crawford, for me, showed that whole new level and that something above that, which is why I probably am leaning and picking Terence Crawford to be the fighter of the year and the pound for pound king as well in boxing.
Yeah, for me, he's the pound for pound king. I think the quality of opposition, particularly with Spence at welterweight, puts him there, and he has gone through a few weights as well. Fighter of the year is a bit tougher though, because no one could claim that either of Inoue's victories over, what was it, Stephen Fulton and then Tapales exceeds what Crawford achieved against Errol Spence. So Errol Spence was in most people's top 10 pound for pound list before the fight with Crawford. So it's 1 pound for pound contender beating another. You know, you could the value of that victory cannot be overstated. However, Inoue fought twice, cleaning up a division, becoming undisputed in 1 calendar year against 2 quality fighters. Now, neither of them were expected to beat Inoue. He was favourite going into both and a heavy favourite at that. But 2 very good fighters. He stopped them both. You know, does beating 2 B+ fighters, does beating 2 B+ fighters exceed beating 1 A+ fighter? And both are in dominant fashion as well. I don't know. See, that's the tough bit for me. I think activity plus performance, does it edge just 1 outstanding performance? Oh, it's a really, really tight one. I don't think I could argue if Inoue got it. I don't think he's done enough to be pound for pound number 1. But then that leads to the question. It's a bit of a follow-up question, really. And, you know, we'll send this out to the chat as well. And Ayman, I'll ask you first. What would Inoue have to do? So say Terence Crawford didn't fight again this year, or he fought Errol Spence in a rematch that he's widely expected to win and did the same thing. What would Inoue have to do to supersede Terence Crawford as the pound for pound number 1? Can he? Is it even possible?
No, I definitely think he can. Naturally continue winning, but the opposition has got to be notched up a level, or at least certain fights. There's one specific fight that we wanted to see. I think we were going to expect to be seen in the World Boxing Super Series, but it didn't materialize those years back when Inoue won it, and that was the fight with Jean-Real Casimero. Casimero had things to. The fight was in the offing, but then Casimero had things to deal with outside the ring. He's now back fighting, and that's a fight where I feel we need to see Inoue in. Casimero as well, having a big punch himself. I won't be afraid. Like Donaire wasn't afraid to trade and go toe-to-toe with Inoue at times. I'd like to see Casimero on the resume this year of Inoue. And also the Akhmadaliev fight as well too. Completely different sort of style to what Inoue has faced beforehand. And I think Inoue dispatching of someone of that ilk, of that pedigree as well too, is another big feather in this cap. And adding to that as well, the bringing the monster over from Japan to America faltered because he came over in those COVID times and we didn't get to, or at least the American fans didn't get to fully appreciate him. I'd like to see more fights of Inoue on different or differing soils, specifically in America as well, to maybe run back that Fulton fight again in America, have those fights in different locations, not just at home. There are some people who would, and I know that Paul Butler is one of those persons that kind of say that, look, he's stacking. That's part of the power there. That's the reason for. And I know that as well. You can, in a way, can counteract that and say, look, I fought in America, and I believe he got the knockout in that fight as well too. So my power holds whether I'm doing that or not. I'm not doing that. Might he say? But that's what I think he'd need to do to really supersede and take over Crawford, who's going to have another good year, I imagine, as well too, with a Spence rematch at whatever weight, and against another one of the, or even Canelo. That's the one that's mooted about as well. It's talked about for Errol Spence Jr. that fight if he won, but that fight with Canelo is not out of the realms of possibility.
Yeah, I mean, if Crawford beats Canelo, he's never coming off the top of the pound.
Yeah, for sure.
Inoue might as well retire. Just C. Dot says, sorry, just jumped out for a minute. Tapales has had brain surgery. Please pray for him. Now, I haven't seen that verified anywhere else, but I've got no reason to doubt Just C. Dot. So if that is indeed the case, then yes, please, thoughts and prayers for Marlon Tapales. Tons1521 says Devin Haney equals fighter of the year. Nah, not this year, I don't think. You know, again, you know, fights that he was expected to win for the most part. I don't think, you know, I know Crawford was expected to beat Spence, but they were 2 pound for pound contenders. I don't think Haney beat anyone of that level this year. I think, you know, maybe 3rd or 4th, but certainly not 1st or 2nd. Smoking Joe says pound for pound. Crawford number 1, Inoue number 2, Canelo number 3, but Inoue fighter of the year. I don't hate that. Wode Meyer says Crawford has gears he himself doesn't know. He makes it up as he goes along. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a scary thought. But then maybe there's stuff he's seen in the gym that, we haven't seen in a competitive fight yet. BLT Chopper says, fight of the year is Boo Boo Andrade versus David Benavidez. Really good fight, but I don't think it's better than Andrade against Caleb Plant. I don't think it's even Andrade's fight of the year. Benavidez's fight of the year. I think Benavidez Plant, it went twice the distance for a start, but I just think it was a more action-packed, better fight, more competitive. So for me, I think that was a better Benavidez fight, never mind fight of the year. But yeah, that's just my thought. Smoking Joe says, if Inoue beats Neary and Akhmadaliev, he takes the number 1 pound for pound spot. Yeah, Lewis Neary, that's another one, of course. Yeah, perhaps. Tons1521 says, Haney beat Lomachenko. Yeah, but again, were many people picking Lomachenko to win that fight? And it was a controversial win. I thought I had Haney winning, but only by a point or two. So it was a close fight. Could have gone either way. It wasn't a dominant performance in the same way that Crawford beat Spence. I don't think there's many people that are going to give Haney Fighter of the Year over Crawford or Inoue on this particular year. But I'm happy to be corrected by the chat. So before we kind of get out of here and let everyone enjoy their hangovers or whatever it is you're doing on this bright and breezy New Year's Day, we should talk a bit about what we think is going to happen generally in 2024 in the boxing world, and not just the fighters we've already discussed. We haven't spoke about Tank Davis, or as he's now known, someone's going to have to tell me what he changed his name to because it's escaped me for the minute. But yeah, Tank Davis, who's he going to fight next? Shakur Stevenson, Canelo himself, of course. What do we expect from those guys? Ayman, do you want to have a few stabs in the dark?
So I believe, what is his name? So Gervonta, I haven't actually seen this, and I might have to do some quick sleuthing on the internet whilst we're talking here, because I've not seen the official confirmation, but I've seen like little points mentioned about Tank's conversion, but nothing official, I believe, maybe from his Instagram or anything like that. But apparently he's now going by the name of Abdul Wahid Davis, maybe. Right. Which is quite the departure. It reminds me of, was it Matthew Saad Mohammed, who was originally, was it Matthew Franklin? Is that right?
Yeah, he was previously, yeah.
Yeah, so
Matthew Saad Mohammed, yeah.
And was it Dwight Muhammad Kawi as well, who was originally had a different name, or am I getting that mixed up?
No, that's right.
Yeah, so Tank has decided to convert, and we'll see a year of change clearly for Tank. But look, fights in the offing for him. World's his oyster for Tank, really, off the back of the Ryan Garcia fight. I would have thought he might be quite disappointed with his year, in the sense that he started it off really early, didn't he? He had the fight in the first half of the year, in the first month of the year, then went into Ryan Garcia, and then didn't do anything for the rest of the year, sort of rested on his laurels. And I remember looking actually earlier today, and I saw his age was like 29, so that he's coming into his 30s now, coming to the real peak of his powers. You feel that with Tank, like he's proved a lot, but there's a lot more to come for Gervonta, who's really kind of pushing himself out there as one of the pound for pound best. World's I'm open to anything really with Tank, because of the nature of the excitement that comes to Tank Davis fights. Shakur Stevenson, look, the Devin Haney fight is the one that's kind of been talked about and mooted about, open for it as well. But not Shakur, kind of, he's one of those fighters where, off of the back of his last performances and the way he kind of boxes, there's no real kind of true excitement from me to really kind of want to see those big fights for him. I think he's got a lot to prove in that sort of sense there. I kind of look to other areas when it comes to like the fighters like a Terence Crawford, who I want to see what happens with the Errol Spence rematch, if that's getting finalized. If he does go for Canelo as well with the PBC deal, where does Canelo go? Is that Benavidez fight going to happen this year? So yeah, those are kind of the directions I look for 2024.
We got Devin Haney's number one fan, Tons1521, in the chat. It says Haney defended the undisputed against Lomachenko and captured second division title in his debut against a two-time champion in Prograis. he at least has a case for Fighter of the Year. I mean, if more people say it, then fair enough in the chat. But so far, you seem to be ploughing rather a lone furrow. I think, he was widely expected to beat Lomachenko, and he actually struggled in that fight. So I'm not sure he gained in the sense that reputation. And then Prograis, again, widely expected to win, but did so in dominant fashion. That's certainly true. But you compare that to Inoue's 2 destructive victories, becoming undisputed in a whole calendar year. I don't think it edges that. And then a lot of people would feel Crawford's 1 win over Spence edges Inoue. Yeah, on Crawford's #1 fan says Tons 1521. Well, start talking him up then. Let's see how that one goes. But yeah, so we talked about Tank there. I know there's a chance Shakur Stevenson. You were talking about Shakur Stevenson fighting Devin Haney. I think Devin Haney is already in talks for that Ryan Garcia fight next up, which for Haney, in terms of profile, he's an incredibly talented boxer, excellent technician, but doesn't perhaps get the profile and the endorsements and maybe even the money that he deserves based on his skills and ability. It's almost a perfect fight for him. You got Ryan Garcia, lost to Tank, got taken out, but didn't look too bad in the early stages of that one. He's made some changes in the training team since then, come back with a win, of course. I think for Haney, that's a fight he'd be very confident of winning, but it's one that can bring him to a lot more mainstream attention. So I think for Haney, I can understand why he would take that fight. And then you've got Canelo. We expect to see him in May, as we always do. Now, a lot depends on what happens between John Ryder and Jamie Munguia in January, because I would imagine Munguia is being lined up as a real option for Canelo in May. But then you've got John Ryder could upset the apple cart, and I don't think many people are going to be clamoring to see a Canelo-Ryder rematch. And that's no, devalue of what Ryder did in the first fight in terms of being tough and lasting the distance and getting off the deck. But you would imagine that fight in Arizona at the end of this month is being set up to make an all-Mexican brawl for Cinco de Mayo between Canelo and Jaime Munguia. So I don't know. I mean, I think I'll give Ryder a really good chance in that fight. So what are the other options for Canelo in May? Because I think they're saving a potential David Benavidez fight for September. So who else, I'm just kind of off the top of my head, who else could Canelo fight in May that's sellable and you give the opponent a decent chance of coming through? Will it be the other Charlo, as I know has been talked about? What do you think, Ayman? Who could be in the opposite corner?
David Morrell is the one name that sticks out to me. A fighter that's coming on very nicely. A fighter that the PBC want to position as one of their bright prospects coming through. A fighter with real talent as well too. I think Morrell's a step or two away from those big fights, and he could be that name that maybe doesn't get the win over Canelo, but looks really good and gets that rub off of the defeat to Canelo.
What about a return to light heavyweight? I mean, I'm not sure that Bivol rematch is ever going to happen, but what if, say, I don't know, Beterbiev, Callum Smith, the winner of that? I know people will say he won't go anywhere near Beterbiev, but he's already beaten Callum Smith. And if he sees Callum give Beterbiev a good fight, or it's relatively close against Beterbiev, would that give Canelo the confidence to go up against Beterbiev at light heavy? Or even if Callum Smith pulls off the upset, could you sell a rematch? Callum Smith, you could say he was weight drained when they fought at super middle. He obviously had that bicep injury that he had to contend with for much of the fight. Could that be sold potentially as a rematch for May? Or
yeah, completely. That's a real good line of thought there, because the Callum Smith fight where Canelo gets rejuvenated off the back of beating Beterbiev because he's been so unbeatable. There is the feeling, the whispers that Beterbiev's slipping, but have we really seen those slips? That Yard fight was a real enthralling fight, but watching that fight back, Beterbiev was really dominant in that fight, but for a couple of spots there. I was there myself in the arena covering it, and it was so easy to get sucked into the fight, but in reality, when you watch it back, it was very, very dominant display from Beterbiev. But with that said, if Callum Smith does that job on Beterbiev, definitely the life is back in that rematch, especially in the way that, look, Joe Gallagher is said in the past, and not fully kind of give away the details on it, but said, look, the amount of time that we had to prepare for that fight, like 4 weeks for it, wasn't really any real time to really do much against the pound king in Canelo, at least at that time. And then the way that fight went off of the back of what was real ingenuity from Canelo to target the bicep of Callum Smith. Callum will kind of feel like, shouldn't let that happen. And but for that, I might be able to have got something off of that. And he's been rejuvenated at this weight, knocking out his recent opponent. So yeah, I do believe that's the likelihood. Should Smith, and he'll wanna get that win back off a Canelo for sure. You want to roll that dice, especially with the money that's going for it. However, Beterbiev wins, no chance. No chances Canelo going in with Beterbiev at all. As well too, because I think and I don't know what the WBC stance is still. I don't know. Yeah, no. Well, depends really, because the WBC stance is that they don't want to sanction the undisputed fight. So is that fight really going to happen between the two? Is it open for, if Bivol holds one of the belts that the WBC would allow the sanction of the undisputed? So would Canelo want to have that option available there to go that route? That those sort of things kind of muddied the waters there a little bit. But yes, if Callum Smith wins, no, if Beterbiev wins.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially if Bivol Beterbiev's on the cards. We've heard reports or seen reports that Bivol signed his half of the contract for an undisputed fight against Beterbiev in Riyadh. Apparently, His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, that's the fight he really wants to see, is Beterbiev against Bivol, which kind of underlines the reports we've seen from people that he is a big boxing fan, because that's more of a hardcore fight, you would say. But yeah, the problem with that is, as you've alluded to there, the WBC have said previously they consider Bivol to be Russian, because he is, and Beterbiev not to be Russian, even though he is. And that would preclude an undisputed title fight, because they do not allow Russian fighters, while the war is ongoing in Ukraine, to compete for their belts. And Beterbiev obviously has the WBC at the moment. They consider him Canadian, because of his residency in Montreal. So I don't know if that stance will change. You would think that if they're anywhere nearer down the road in negotiations for a fight in Riyadh, then maybe behind the scenes the nod's already been given. Maurizio Sulaiman, we see him quite a lot over in Riyadh for all these big events that are taking place. He seems to get on well with the power structure, the family over there. So it wouldn't surprise me if a deal's already been done behind the scenes for that to take place and for it to involve the WBC title. Whether that's, they're going to consider Bivol naturalized of another nation because of where he trains. I'm not sure how they'll get around it, because they don't want to, change the whole policy, I would imagine. But whoever wins, I want it to lead to a big fight. So if Callum Smith brings the upset, I'd like to see him get that rematch with Canelo. And if Beterbiev wins in impressive fashion, it's time for the Bivol fight. They're both the other side of 30 now, I believe. We talked earlier about the age of Tank Davis. I mean, Beterbiev's getting on a bit now. He shows no signs of slipping necessarily, but him against Bivol needs to be made sooner rather than later. And then whoever wins that, then you've got the challenge of where you place that person on the pound for pound list, between Inoue and Crawford, and then you've got someone who's become undisputed at light heavyweight against a dominant fellow champion as well. That's a valuable win up there with Crawford beating Spence. So yeah, I suppose we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it's exciting times. I think 2024. I interviewed Lou DiBella just before Christmas. We put out today the review of 2023, and he sounded a bit of a note of caution, particularly in the US, about boxing. Although the big fights are being made, about boxing increasingly becoming a niche attraction, particularly because traditional boxing platforms like HBO and Showtime have left the sport. And we know that PBC have recently done a deal with Amazon Prime, and we might see more streaming services come in. But in America, particularly, the majority of top boxing now is either on pay-per-view, a streaming service, or both. So there are worries there, but there is a trend of the big fights happening, of undisputed champions being crowned. So I think there's a lot to be hopeful about going into 2024. Ayman, what do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's just on the point of the WBC. Like, there's as far as I can tell, there's been no information as to any special dispensation. I know that Mauricio was open to look if any, documentation is given to us about Bivol and his circumstances and where he aligns politically. That might change the situation. Mauricio seemed open to it. Maybe those lines have been followed through, but nothing as of yet on that point. So we'll remain to find out. But yeah, look, a lot to be positive off of on the back of a year where we've seen. I mean, boxing's got to really kind of build off of this big year. We had some real big fights at the start of the year when it came to Davis and Garcia, as we mentioned, Spence and Crawford, as we mentioned. And also, look, I've been really clear about it. I'm uncertain as to whether those fights garnered the pay-per-view buys or the traction that they should have and maybe would have a few years back as well. So there's that little bit in the background of each and every big fight now to make sure that we're getting these fights at the right time and make sure that boxing is as hot as it's being perceived to be when we're truly boxing fans know it's a minority and niche sport. So the future of boxing kind of remains to be in the balance when you have also the misfits boxing or the social media influencer scene rising and rising and rising as it has, and the demand seems to be gaining more and more so in that sector of the game where now fighters are establishing or influencers are now establishing themselves as legitimate fighters, notably in the name of or the form of Jake Paul. So there is a real kind of need for boxing to really kind of hold and push back against that by making those big fights. And really the Saudi Arabian scene or their kind of input into boxing holds more significance when they're the ones putting the money forward and making those fights. Therefore, we should be clamoring maybe in a roundabout way for more fights over in Saudi Arabia, if that's what makes it get those fights over the line. So another key year in boxing where, again, as well, I know you're trying to strike the positive chord, but also we've seen networks depart from boxing too. And that's a real big problem where I know we're switching over to apps and such, but TV is still the predominant force of the way we consume things. And broadcasters and those, detracting their support away from this sport only serves to make boxing that little bit more harder to find, that little bit more inaccessible. And that's a real big problem because if the eyes on the sport aren't on the sport, the money's not there, the fighters aren't getting paid, the fights aren't getting made. We're not talking here on Seconds Out. It all feeds back down to where boxing isn't in a great place. So another key year where we should be watching boxing very clearly. And I said it before, I think a few weeks back, 4 or 5 weeks back, or whatever it was before the Day Reckoning event. Does Eddie, Frank, these promoters and the Day of Reckoning working together, is it the start of the something, or is it the signal of the beginning of the end? That's kind of my feeling.
Paraphrasing Winston Churchill on this New Year's Day of 2024.
That's the one. But look, focus on the positive. Hopefully more big fights. Hopefully more big nights. And again, Seconds Out will have it covered here.
Yeah. Let's remember the important point. Seconds Out will be the predominant and most interactive boxing YouTube channel in 2024. Will continue to be. Guys, really appreciate you all watching, especially on New Year's Day. My thing's showing that we've still only got 2 thumbs up, which is completely stunning considering about 1,500 people have tuned in so far. But hopefully that's just a YouTube glitch and you're not all being, Grinches, because Christmas is over now and you can relax and be nice to people. But yeah, really appreciate you all tuning in. We'll be back next Monday at 5 p.m. when we'll have some actual fights to look ahead to, which is always a good thing. But yeah, festive greetings to everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Ayman, the last words, as usual, go to you.
Yeah, thanks again for tuning in for Seconds Out last year. Hoping for a real big year this year. As goes boxing, so does Seconds Out. As goes Seconds Out, so do you in the chat supporting us too. We really do appreciate each and every single one of you, from myself, Danny, Raheem, Frank, all the freelancers that help too, all the videographers that help too.
Josh Green.
Josh, can't forget Josh, and Robert Waterman, who says thanks. Thank you all for tuning in to Seconds Out this year. Looking forward to a great year.